Okay, now coming to another issue that you and I have.
So these are the 4, but I'm working on 10 more, which I won't talk about.
Okay, we look forward to
I
those
have
10 more.
several more in the pipeline.
No, I wanted to go back to a theme that we had in the past, had many conversations on. Why is it that Indians who go to the West, particularly the US, as scientists, as engineers, as medical doctors in the IT industry, their connection to India is totally different, especially those of them who decide to take responsibility for India or try to engage with India. There's one kind, even in the scientific community, which says India is just too messy and you can't really make much sense of it, you can't make careers, there's nothing in it, no future for our kids there. But another kind that are whether sitting there or coming back are engaging with India and taking responsibility for it, be it adopting their village school or taking on development programs over a particular area, be it in their own village or around it, or inventing solutions, IT solutions that can be used in India for serving the poor, the most downtrodden. I mean, there's a lot of that coming from the scientific community. But on the other hand, there is the social science community. Almost all of those from India who are going abroad to study humanities or social sciences end up in the South Asia Studies ghetto. Be it in Australia, be it England, be it Paris, be it New York, Canada, anywhere in the West. They go and get stuck in this ghetto.
It's like a very pretty animal in one of the prestigious animals in the zoo. Both Achitra बैठे हुए हैं सब लोग.
Not really so prestigious because they are least funded. I mean, compare them to China Studies Department or East Asia.
10 times bigger.
10 times, 100 times bigger, and carry much more clout in terms of policy making. I don't think this group is ever consulted seriously for policy making. It's coming from elsewhere. They are fed peanuts, and yet they are far more loyal to
So I'll tell you my analysis of this.
And no, the point is that when they go there, I mean, from this community and Biradari, we haven't produced one American studies specialist. They don't go to study America.
There's no innovation, there's no confidence.
No, forget innovation. Just go, if you're going to America, why don't you do American studies? If you go to France, why aren't you doing French studies? If you are in Australia, Australian studies, because India today sorely lacks people with expertise on the global domain, in the global scene.
That has been a long-term issue of mine.
They sit in America or Australia to study India through their
lens.
Through the Western lens or the dominant lens, and come for brief trips to India.
And then because this guy is an Indian and maybe have a Hindu name, when he comes here, we buy it. People, the average Indian buys it as sort of the gospel.
But why don't they want to engage with the West? Like the scientists,
so let me tell you,
competed with the best in the West, came out triumphant.
Right. So let me give you my
they're
analysis.
accepted.
I'll give you my analysis why there's a difference there, because it's obviously something I've looked at and analyzed quite a lot, being part of it myself.
And I want to add one more thing. Which is, it's not as if, unlike those who doing, the Chinese who work in China departments or East Asian studies departments, they try to help the Westerners understand China better through the Chinese lenses. But the Indians
go the other way around. Try to impress them that we've learned your theory. We've learned this new theory that you have, and we have learned how to apply it. So the West is the theory wala, and the Indian is the data wala.
That's right.
The data
structuralism, post-structuralism,
hunter-gatherer. The hunter-gatherer going on gathering and supplying. माँ बाप आपके लिए मैं एक केस स्टडी ले आया हूँ आपके लिए
to prove you right, how horrible we are, how badly we treat our women, how badly we treat our Dalits, how how we are decimating our tribals.
Right. So I'll tell you now, I want to, okay, so now there are several factors. One is the scientific, technical person has an objective training which is not culturally sensitive, in the sense that, you look through a telescope, you'll get the same, everybody from any country looking through that will get the same observation, which is not true of culture. When you're looking at a culture, then, another person looking at the same set of situations will say, well, I don't see that, I see it differently. So there is a certain objectivity versus subjectivity, so there's less chance of being culturally prejudiced in science as compared to social sciences, which by its very nature has a certain kind of a bias towards who's the one gazing. The gazer's culture is more relevant in the humanities than in, say, physics or in mathematics.
No,
because you have an objectivity test in the hard sciences.
But even in the hard sciences, there's a lot that the West borrowed from India,
yes,
or from the Arab world,
yes,
in the science domain,
yes,
or from China.
Right.
And then they pretend it was all theirs.
That's correct.
It never came in. So even there,
yes,
this image of India as a unscientific.
No, but that's
community.
a different issue. That's a different issue. The point being that an Indian mathematician and an American mathematician are working on the same mathematics.
That's right.
Yeah. So they're both working on the same theorem, regardless of who originated and the history of it may be contested. But the mathematics itself is not contested. So
there's common ground.
There's common ground, and therefore there is that.
Secondly, and a level playing field for that reason.
So what has happened is, because of that, Indians have been able to get confidence, whereas since there is not a level playing field in the humanities, you do not have Indians saying, I can beat you at this game, I'm as much a player as you are on this game. He knows he's playing on the other guy's turf, on the other guy's rules. The Indian in humanities and social sciences ultimately knows that these are theories that they have developed. We don't have ours, or he doesn't know of any. So he's dependent, he's colonized, he's very grateful to them. So I think first is the objectivity inherent versus subjectivity inherent. Second is the self-confidence of the Indian technocrat that I'm as good as anyone else. And the experience shows it. I myself am a product of that. I am amazed when I'm negotiating with Western people. I would be amazed that way back in the 90s and all that, when I did that, I was better off with no other Indian present, because I can hold my own, I can dominate, I can do it my way, I can win these things. The moment some bunch of Indians...
And you had something that they wanted from you.
Yes, something they want, and they know that...
and its value was universally recognized.
Yes, and they know they can't get the better of me and push me around. Once there's a lot of Indians from India coming, then suddenly they actually become a handicap for me, because they suddenly start looking up at these guys, talking like bacharas, talking like, hum to gareeb hain, aap hi zyada jante hain. In a sense, by associating with them, I felt down.
No, but
I would often have to say,
in the science world,
not science people. I'm talking to an average guy coming, a humanities type person, or an Indian diplomat, or an Indian media guy. I wouldn't want them around, because it would create a problem for me. In that he would sell short and lower my value from what it would be on my own. So I think there is this inferiority complex which the social sciences and humanities people carry from India,
and cultivate systematically.
And the hard sciences people do not have that inferiority complex. This is where it boils down to. Partly it's the nature of the discipline, partly it's our abilities and success and analytical training, and the result of all this is that the technocrat is not burdened with this inferiority complex the way the social sciences people are. And then there's another factor. When you are raised in school in India, if you are a science type, you have been freed from the brainwashing of the whole Indian history as taught to the arts types. The arts types are brainwashed. Today when I go and have talks and all that all over the place, I'm better off talking to IITs. I've had great talks at Bhabha Research, Indian Institute of Sciences. Those guys, very happy to hear me. Very difficult to go to St. Stephen's College where I studied, or to go to Delhi University or JNU, these kind of places, because these guys are so buried in the theories they've learned that they will only see our country through those eyes, the eyes of those theories. So it's a combination of all these factors, and this is the crux of the problem that for 20 years I'm trying to understand and grapple with. I do not think that the people within the humanities are going to be able to step out of their institutional protection and be audacious enough. That's another reason. When a person from the hard sciences takes on these issues, he's not jeopardizing his situation as an engineer or as a physicist, because वहाँ पर तो जो होना है, it has nothing to do with what he's talking about. So even if I had not retired, even if I were doing my technocrat work, I could go on doing this because it would not affect my core profession. But if I was some history professor or English professor or some kind of writer somewhere, and I'm dependent on कौन मेरे को award देगा, कौन क्या करेगा, and all those mechanisms.
Next fellowship, tenure track, all that, you're
मेरे को
finished.
literary festival जयपुर में बनाएंगे नहीं बनाएंगे. Maybe those guys will not be happy with what I've said. They'll boycott me.
No, you don't get fellowship. Full stop.
Yeah.
You don't get invitation to conferences. Full stop.
Right.
I saw that. I mean, I used to be a very big star in the conference network and lecture circuit, but as I made it clear that I was not here to do misery peddling, it all stopped. Now I could take it, but if you are a young person
who's trying to build a career, then they have to sell out.
No, I'm saying I did it pretty much early. I mean, let's say when I wrote my first disclaimer, why I do not call myself a feminist. There was one way of saying I don't care, and it's since then that these invitations kind of started getting less and less. I was very young at that time. The point that I'm trying to make is that this is one aspect of it, which is they can completely stymie you,
blacklist you. They can.
Your books
ranks.
will not be read.
They will
not be footnoted.
Yes.
They will not be part of any course curriculum. Those who actually plagiarize from you will have them themselves listed.
People are taking my ideas and writing it as their own, audaciously ignoring me, because bringing me in would legitimize them. It would jeopardize them, because a whole lot of other things I'm saying would also be read by Amazon. So they want to selectively pluck what they haven't been imaginative enough to do on their own, and leave me completely out of it. So I feel that fighting this plagiarism that I'm facing.
Oh, we've gone through it. I could write a whole book on that.
Yeah.
But more importantly, I'm told that in America or in England, let's say a young student goes, a historian, and wants to specialize in American studies, or in France wants to specialize in French studies, French history, they'll just push you out.
There's only been a few cases and they've been looked down upon and really dealt with harshly.
Totally marginalized.
Yes.
And so there is one part is that of course it's very remunerative to do misery peddling or fault line peddling. But the other is that those who wish to are apparently not allowed. Even in terms of writing term papers, I'm told young students who opt to write on the West are discouraged and snubbed.
If you are, there is a kind of ethnic profiling. It is expected you're an Indian student, and if they are writing, your assignment will be on caste if they're talking about prejudice and all that, and you're supposed to pump out a negative thing and problems like that. So this kind of putting people into these ethnic categories and marginalizing them and expecting them to reproduce what the system has perpetuated is all pervasive. And it's called academic freedom and whatnot, but I know I have documented emails, cases from people where the dissertation would not be allowed unless you take out that one chapter from the dissertation. Where they are showing that the prevailing thesis is wrong, and this new idea they're bringing in, they have to remove it. So the prejudice against our civilization, which is a Hindu civilization, is very deep. It is a very deep, and Indians have become colonized. Indian apparatus, intellectual apparatus in India, the think tanks, whatever you may call them, these government funded things and private funded things, the literary festivals are colonized, the media is like that, the government civil service people are like that. So this is a very serious problem, and it's like a cancer that has spread in many ways.
But don't you think it's ironical that people from the left liberal segment are forever beating their breasts about the ghettoization of minorities, of Muslims, of this, that and the other. But they're so happy in their intellectual ghetto.
Correct.
In America,
yes.
in Australia,
yes.
in Canada, almost never seek to break out.
Yes. So this is the success of the colonizer, to create a small tier of colonized people who are made to feel like you are a little superior to the rest and you're almost like us, like the Anglo-American, the Anglo-Irish, who were Irish people, but treated like the ruling, British English elite, who would be used as middlemen, sort of like zamindar types, to control the rest of them. So this is an intellectual zamindari, in a sense, that our people have.
But why have our intellectuals not sought parity, at least with the Chinese? Why can't they see the difference between...
See, Chinese were not colonized long enough.
There is no Indian studies. It has to be South Asian studies.
Right.
So you are at par with
Pakistan
and all the rest.
Yeah. Right.
Secondly, the kind of money, the kind of political clout, the kind of range of subjects that they study are totally different. For example, it won't just be the fault line study. There are hardly any social scientists, for example, doing defense studies. Seriously. You can count on your fingertips people who come back having specialized in defense studies, for instance. It's all this caste, tribe, gender.
The issues have been set up by somebody else.
Yes.
And the parameters, the paradigm has been defined. And now you can keep filling the blanks with more examples, but you cannot break that. That is the cage in which these people are trapped in. And they don't have the brains, the innovation, the audacity, the courage, the risk-taking to break out of it. And a few people who try to, they have to be set as examples to be beaten up so that others won't do it. They have to be hanged like Bhagat Singh. That is what has happened.
Politically hanged.
Yeah, they are politically hanged like Bhagat Singh. So a person like me is considered very dangerous.
Oh yes.
Because first of all, they can't do anything to me. I'm not looking for anything from them. They can go on doing all this, but I just keep producing more. And gradually, and not so gradually now, more and more people are becoming aware and they started following. So it is very dangerous. So they have to get more and more Indians to fight me, ostracize me, because I'm a very dangerous person. Otherwise, if they could be more like me, it would be very bad for them. This is a very insidious colonization. It's after independence, it's like updated, modernized 2.0 colonization.
Okay,
so it's
now
worse than the British colonization.
How do we? Let's come to the final round now. How do we change this? What do you think can trigger off meaningful, effective changes?
So, I'm writing a book on this. One of my books, but one of the soon ones I will write. There are 3 parts to how the colonial mindset works. The narrative is colonized. The human being who carries the narrative is colonized and sold out. And third is the institutional apparatus is colonized. So we have to decolonize the narrative, we have to decolonize the human resource, and we have to decolonize the institutions.
Where does the language? Our dependence on English language.
That is the narrative. The narrative and language are inseparable. If you clean up the narrative and say these are all these issues, whether it's Aryan theory, caste, ye wo, ye sab galat hai, and here is the new narrative. As long as that narrative is there without human beings who embody it, it's no good. So you need to retrain a large number of people in administrative services, foreign services, ports, in media, education, universities. You have to retrain the whole intelligentsia who have been raised on a certain narrative.
Are you saying it can or cannot be done without doing away with our dependence on English language as the medium of intellectual discourse?
I think there's multiple levels of disruption. The ultimate would be you do away with it. Because in China, while they keep saying that China is now teaching English, is not so. It's a second language.
Of course.
After a certain age. Up to a certain age in France, you learn French. In Russia, you learn Russian as your medium of instruction. That's your mother tongue. In Japan, you learn Japanese. In China, you learn Chinese. After a certain age, you learn English as a language, not as a medium of thinking. So first of all, this business that they have here, that everybody else is now doing, it is not true. only we are shutting down all our native language schools and media and turning them over to English in a rapid way. So my feeling is that's the ultimate. And you need a multi-pronged attack at various points. So that is one place you attack. But there's a huge population and huge momentum of English which is not going to go away. So one of the things I want to do is change the narrative in that, change the content in that, and introduce Sanskrit non-translatables as a new way of thinking within English also. Now it is very fashionable to say things like, aloo matar in these English writers, they will say aloo matar or something like that, and everybody will say, humne English bana diya. I'm not talking about those non-translatables. I'm not talking about silly pop culture references, which is what this whole jing-bang lot of literary people are doing. I'm talking about deep philosophical concepts that are philosophically not replaceable because the equivalent thing does not exist. There is no equivalent thing there. So whatever word you use is going to be a distortion. So those should be done. But the narrative has to be challenged in terms of the basic assumptions about us, our history, our society, our philosophy, the way they've been misrepresented. So once this narrative, while the narrative change is one prong of this, retraining the human resource in this narrative is the second prong of this. But this will not be sustainable as long as the institutions are tainted and they have to be detoxified. So now you need institutions which will not only nurture the narrative and nurture the human resource, but also extend it into the future and into the future generations.
But then
so
that
it's
requires a whole political tectonic shift.
It's a tectonic shift where...
Can't happen without politics of the country
Correct.
changing.
That is correct. See, now I have spent the last 20 years in this counter narrative, and for however long I'm able to continue doing it, and now I'm very good at accelerating, pumping things out because the research has been done, now I need to get it out. But my concern is there's a huge lag between the narratives I'm producing and its assimilation and utilization by human resource because people are not reading enough. Our people are not reading enough. I am read more by my competitors and my opponents. I'm read more by them than by our own people.
See, it's not just not reading you. Let's take another person who did the work you're doing in another way, which is Dharampal.
Dharampal, yes, yes.
He battled his entire life and produced these tomes very laboriously. He was not as gifted as you are as far as speed writing and speed everything is concerned, but still spent his whole life. And yet, he remains totally marginalized. And very few people took up that mission or that agenda and developed it further.
That's correct. And they're all living off of quoting him.
They're all living off, or most of them are living off of quoting.
Quoting him and just he's some kind of an icon. But
so what you need to do is not just people who will read you or Dharampal or XYZ.
But continue the work.
Continue the work and there be institutional support for it.
So this is what I want to do.
Mentoring researchers.
So what I want to do is try to replicate myself, mentor into a large number of, or at least a critical mass of young scholars who continue this work.
No, that's you. There's a limit to what you can do.
Sure.
I mean, Dharampal did it very effectively. Actually, he changed the thinking of a whole generation of people who returned from America. Again, almost all of them from the scientific community. It's not a coincidence that he found followers mainly from among these IIT honchos.
Right.
People who went, having done their IIT, went abroad, did science, etc., and then decided to come back to India. Some of them directly motivated by Dharampalji's thinking. He didn't find many followers in the social science domain. And even today, the few who may read him don't want to follow him for fear of being tainted again with the colors of Hindutva, so to speak. Hindutva is equal to fascism, is equal to all that retrogressive, every bad thing.
Guilt by association.
Guilt by association.
आपको किसी से once you are associated with X, X is associated with Y, आपको you're with Nazi.
That's
इतना फटाफट हो गया.
That's
yeah.
Now that kind of terror is what keeps people from. I know people, for example, who are from BJP families, young kids who go to study abroad, and they daren't admit that their family has that connection. I've had, BJP senior leaders, some of them tell me how badly their kids are treated if they end up in these so-called liberal arts colleges or universities abroad. They're treated like as though they come straight out of running gas chambers and or slaughtering Muslims or whatever. Really, treated with disdain, treated as a subhuman species. So they daren't even, they themselves, despite having that political background, don't dare take up these issues for study because your guides won't allow you or not treat you with respect. Your PhD thesis is likely to get stuck. You won't find anybody ready to publish it. So all of this means the effort has to be much larger than what you or one or two others can achieve.
And the government, a really genuine patriotic government has to do its job in this. Because this dismantling cannot be done by individual people.
That's
right. We're doing whatever we can, but we are burning out. The government has to understand that the entire social sciences and humanities apparatus, the kind of people who get book awards, the kind of people who are celebrating these literary festivals, the kind of people that these NGO networks are nurturing, this is a huge cancer which is destroying the nation. And even if a patriotic regime comes in, unless they can change all that, they will be thrown out. The pendulum will swing one way for a few years and swing back. Because you have to use the opportunity, the window of opportunity that you get as a different sort of a government to dismantle that whole apparatus. And
how do you do it? You don't have the personnel.
Yeah.
All the institutions are today dominated by certain left but very illiberal.
So if you don't have the institutions, you cannot produce the people, and if you don't have the people, you cannot clean up the institutions. This is the chicken and egg. And you don't have the narrative in the first place, so even if you put right people there, उनको समझ नहीं है कि क्या narrative भी क्या है. So it's a three-pronged. Narrative feeds the people run the institutions, and the institutions produce more narrative, and this is the cycle in which I'm writing this book. How to do this three-pronged attack. And this is my first discussion in public about this that I'm writing on.
Okay.
This is the narrative, the human beings that have to be trained in rethinking, and the institutions that have to be revitalized. So narrative feeds the people, and the people run the institutions, and then these institutions then produce more narrative. It's a three cycle, which is now going in one direction, has to be moved in a different direction, a different narrative to be programmed into people and running the institutions. So
do you think if there is change of regime at the center, for example, let's say BJP comes in as the dominant partner or the leading partner, do you see much hope of this happening?
I think the big problem will be that the BJP, as best as I can tell, and the Sangh Parivar in general, do not have the quality of people who understand this narrative, who can then be the leaders in the institutions to replace the previous people. Because if cronyism is the basis for appointing new people, then it's going to be even worse. We're going to be.
Which is what happened during Murli Manohar Joshi's time.
During the previous regime,
he picked up handpicked cronies.
Yeah. So what will happen is
became an object of ridicule.
So either the persons to be selected may end up being very bombastic, fiery, these kind of guys who don't understand the narrative we're talking about, or they'll be the ones who can get votes and get funding, and therefore they are obliged to be given something as a reward, but they're not qualified for it. So unqualified people, not based on genuine merit, getting into all this can mess up the whole victory and turn it into actually the acceleration of the Breaking India. Because now what you'll have is the wrong kind of people, it'll backfire. And so the type of revolution that you and I would like to see won't happen. This is my concern. Where are these people? I don't see them. Where are these people in large quantities?
So let's try creating a platform to see how many exist in India.
Okay.
There can't be such a total vacuum.
There are people, but they're isolated. They have to be brought together. They have to be brought together.
Yeah.
They have to learn that we've got to work together. We have to trust each other. We have to respect each other's originalities and works and all that. And because what we're up against,
and support each other.
See,
what happens is everybody expects themselves to be supported.
Yes.
Nobody wants to support anybody else.
Yes.
And that's really where the left
They've
has
done very
a
well.
huge advantage.
Because if you have a fight with one, next day 200 of them are boycotting.
Your enemy.
You will get a petition where those all exam sign kar denge. They all understand what it is. So I have been through that. I understand because, and the other part of it is, unless you've had encounters, which both of us have very unusual backgrounds, that unless you have had encounters, you don't know what you're talking about.
And we practiced it.
Yeah,
we practiced challenging.
I have done 100 to 150 events per year for 20 years. Just my previous trip in India, I did 40 some events in one trip of about a month and a half. So I would go to Bangalore and do 7 events, and in a day there could be 2 or 3 events. It could be a college talk, it could be a discussion here, whatever there. So these events, which means about 2,000 events over 20 years, are my data gathering. This is my field work. I know what different types of people are thinking. I know the insiders of Hinduism, what they're capable of thinking. I know the enemies, what they're capable of thinking. I know what the youth are thinking. So a lot of our people who are second guessing me, pontificating, even in support of me, have never gone outside the comfort zone. They are with like-minded people. अपना एक समोसा होता है, एक चाय होती है, और एक वो very high carbs, greasy खाना देते हैं लोगों को. Our lunch is like that. The events of like-minded people typically serve this kind of lunch. And I don't want to get more specific than that. But the quality of IQ, the quality of thinking
depends on the quality of snacks you serve.
Maybe it is maybe the other way around. Maybe that is why they serve these kind of things. But what I'm saying is that I don't see a whole lot of people. I mean, I find out of a whole workshop I do somewhere, maybe वहाँ पर 2 मिल जाएंगे.
But don't end on this negative.
No,
I think you owe it to yourself to start. I mean, if all these 2,000 lectures, I haven't given you 200 people.
If I get the funding, if I had, see, I gave away a few $1 million, which is all I had, and I gave it away. I wish I had now that, because now I have the narrative. I didn't have the narrative. It took me all this research to get the narrative. And I have the people, I have some very smart young people, very bright, who write to me that we're willing to give up everything, you tell me what to do. But I do not have a place to put them. You need institutions. I need an institution. If there were an institution where such people would be nurtured, funded, taken care of, I could produce a small forge, intellectual Kshatriyas, intellectuals who can argue, reason, go and become teachers, become propagators of our civilization.
So Rajiv, time for you to focus on this and not just on your next book. Okay, with this, we'll wind up today's conversation and continue with it yet another day.
But the book could be what opens the door to this.
Good. All the very best.
It could be a blueprint on how to do this.
How to do it. Well,
wonderful.
All the very best.
Thank you.